you guys have face with a name. We all know them. They're like Sting and Cher, Madonna. They basically have first names that when we talk about Bill and Keith and Garrett, these are the guys we're talking about. So here's the OGs, and John, please take it from here.
In a testament to how quickly the beer industry can change, it's hard to imagine, even just a few years ago, that a panel like this would be taking place at the Kraft Brewers Conference. But as the beer industry matures, there is a tilt towards health and wellness, and the rise of non-alcoholic beer in the craft space cannot be ignored, and it shouldn't be ignored. So I'm John Holl. I'm the editor of All About Beer and Beer Edge, and I'm delighted to be here in this area, sponsored by ProBrewer at the 2022 Kraft Brewers Conference. Thank you again to ProBrewer, our editorial partner and the sponsor for this area. You can level up your beer and knowledge, or your beer brewing knowledge, by visiting ProBrewer.com. And that's my cell phone. Sorry.
That would be the time for everyone.
Yeah, seriously, yeah.
To mute.
That was the...
Silent mode is on.
Sorry about that. I'm very excited to have this panel, and I hope that you'll now join me in welcoming Garrett Oliver. He is the brewmaster of the Brooklyn Brewery, the author of the Brewmaster's Table, and the editor-in-chief of the Oxford Companion to Beer. This is when we applaud for everybody. He is the co-founder and CEO of Athletic Brewing Company, and brewmaster and co-founder of Syria. Am I saying that right? Mm-hmm. Syria? I knew I was going to botch it. Beverages Company. Keith Phillip, thank you so much for being here as well. We're going to be taking questions as this goes on, but Garrett, I want to start with you because when I think about your brewing career, how you've honored tradition, how you have innovated in a lot of space. I think about your cocktail beer program a couple of years ago where you're trying to make beers that were inspired by your deft use of barrels and wood. Is NA a different challenge, unlike what you've faced in the past?
Well, it is a different challenge. It's a technical challenge. It's also, I would say, a philosophical and emotional challenge. So I think, I come at this from maybe a different direction than a lot of people, and I'll be, clear about it. I believe in alcohol. I really believe in alcohol. I believe in it the same way I believe in fat and salt, which are things that, if not taken in moderation, will kill you. If I don't eat non-fat things, I don't eschew salt, but you got to be careful. You eat a whole big bag of potato chips every day, and you eat, bags of French fries, and you eat a stick of butter, you're going to die. Same thing with alcohol. And these things can enhance your life or they can destroy you. So I think of them that way, and to me, I love fermentation and I love what alcohol can do in your life. However, when we got to this, we were coming from a different background, I think, than everybody else here. We were looking at our European markets, where there was a very different outlook towards NA beer. Now, people may not know this, but outside of the Brooklyn, the New York City area, the biggest market for Brooklyn brewery today is France, followed closely by Sweden and the UK. So we sell beer in 35 countries, and a lot of these countries do not have the same attitude towards alcohol and NA beer that we do. So so this is the first time we actually did a market study. We never done like a really big market study. Our European partners asked us to do this, and what we discovered was that the main word that was associated among Americans with NA beer was disappointment. And so we looked at the opportunity in Europe, and we saw that it was a completely different attitude in Europe. You saw somebody drinking a traditional NA beer in the United States, you said to yourself, well, this person has a drinking problem. This is what it meant, period. In Europe, it might mean that you plan to go hiking in the morning, or that you had a regular beer and that you would just kind of switch back and forth. And so there was a completely different meaning behind it, and we thought that if we could do this well, that we would actually present the European drinkers with a different kind of NA beer with a different flavor set. And for me, despite the fact that I believe in alcohol, this was a very interesting challenge. Now, I told the people we were working with that I was the last person on earth who was going to have any interest whatsoever in consuming this product. I was very, very clear. I was also incorrect. So, and during the pandemic, I definitely learned that there was a great utility to having non-alcoholic beer in the house, and it's actually been fun to try to chase this rabbit, you know.
That sort of brings me to a question I wanted to ask Keith, because you were responsible for one of the best-known beer brands in the U.S. in Blue Moon, which had broad consumer appeal. You know, there were craft drinkers, non-craft drinkers, but the flavors appealed to a wide selection of drinkers. Is there a possibility that NA can have that same broad appeal?
Of course, yeah. It's the thing we've got to do is really educate both retailers and consumers, because a lot of people really associate non-alcoholic beer with O'Doul's. And it's, you know, as you go through the market, a lot of folks are, well, I guess kudos to Anheuser-Busch for being so good at marketing, but when you go out and talk to people about non-alcoholic beer, they think, like Garrett said, you're either pregnant if you're a female, or you're a recovering alcoholic, or you're on medication or something. So, but once they find out that practically any style of beer can be reproduced without alcohol, it still tastes pretty good. That's when you start to find believers in the category. So, and it's not just a fad that's going to go away. It's a lifestyle. It's a trend that's here to stay. And so I believe strongly in it, and I think it's something that consumers are now going to have an option when they want to pace themselves on a Friday night, or if they're sober curious and they want to find out what it's like to go out with friends and experience a nice weekend partying and dancing, having fun without alcohol. I mean, a lot of young people in the older days used to. This is my 40th year of brewing. I started in 1982. So in the old days, a lot of people would be buzzed or drunk when they went out. Nowadays, people are much more educated, much more wiser, smarter about going out, and people want to know what it's like to do that with a sound state of mind, wake up in the morning without a hangover. So it is. I think everything is coming together, and it's going to be a whole new era for the drinker. It gives them a lot of options.
Bill, you've connected, I think, through Athletic with NA consumers really well. People seem to identify with the brand and have sort of made it part of their post-exercise routines, their lifestyle and everything. As you've been talking to the consumers, talking to the drinkers, what are they looking for when it comes to an NA experience? Aside from disappointment, avoiding disappointment.
Yeah, I'm really just honored to be up here with two absolute legends in craft beer, Garrett and Keith, and like the work they have done out in front of all of us currently in the industry now. Like, I can't imagine how many people's first craft beer was either in Blue Moon or Brooklyn, or like Brooklyn was the whole New York City craft beer scene for so long. So super cool. Excited to be up here. But yeah, in echoes of so much of what they said, I think one thing Athletic has always been clear about is, like, we're not a soapbox company. We're not trying to bring back prohibition. We're like, in the modern life, there are times where you want to drink and not. And very often it's Friday and Saturday night, very specific hours or work occasions. But even some of those occasions you do or don't want to be drinking, or you might be, as Garrett said, just like swapping occasions in the same occasion. And we wanted to make beer, great beer, that doesn't compromise at all on that social experience, on the flavor, on the excitement of the can, and take beer, non-alcoholic beer, from that penalty box to a really positive, aspirational place, so that it wasn't something you had the label turned in your hand or poured in a glass before anyone in your group saw it. It was something you had the label out and you were hoping people asked you about, and you were like, you've got to try this. Look what I found. It's amazing. And they talk about it and it spreads. And something I've heard Brooklyn say a lot is like the 6-pack test in your fridge. Like if you put a 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer in your fridge, just watch how fast it disappears, and you'll find, oh my goodness, there are beer occasions on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or the day on Saturday, at all different hours of the day than you've traditionally been drinking beer. And it's like, oh my goodness, like this Friday and Saturday night occasion that the world has been knife fighting for decades, all of a sudden there's other days of the week, and there's another 50% of the population who's not drinking craft beer, who now might be open to a totally new growth category of this business. So it's
And the whole rest of the day. I mean, I discovered, this utility that I didn't expect to exist when I started running into a problem, because at the end of the day, I'd be on my way to the gym. And you're at my age, you can't not go to the gym, or everything goes, everything goes downhill really rapidly. And so, I'd be on my way to the gym, and my brewing team would be at our bar in the tap room saying, "Hey, Garrett, come have a beer with us." And I would have to make a decision. I'm either going to have a beer with my team, or I'm going to go to the gym, but I can't do both. Because, I had discovered the hard way that if I have even a half a beer, that gym routine is going to be the worst, the worst hour of my life. So I couldn't make that happen. And then I just realized, well, wait, I can go to the bar and I can have this beer and I have the same overall experience with my team and then go to the gym. And it was like magic. I'm like, wow, this is really great. And I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything, and neither did our customers, because we would sometimes, in the early days of development, we just say to them, "Hey, this is our new lager. You want to taste it?" They were like, and they'd start drinking. It's like, "Yeah, this is great." Whatever else, nobody ever noticed anything. And when you told them that it was non-alcoholic, they were shocked. And that's when we knew maybe this could happen in the United States. It was about like 4 years ago, or 5 years ago.
It is the goal, because I know when you taste an O'Doul's or some of the other, I've said recently that they taste like disappointment in some ways, but there are some flavors that come from non-alcoholic beers because of brewing process, because of how they're constructed, that you can sometimes taste that it is an NA beer. Is the goal to have that seamless experience so that when you're drinking an NA, you're going to be thinking that it's a real beer, or should there be differentiation between the two so that we can separate it in our minds?
From my perspective, I think they should be pretty similar in taste, but without alcohol. Alcohol has that trigenital sensation on the palate. I just got done judging how many days of the World Beer Cup. I was judging all these high alcohol beers, and I think I'm on my 4th liver now. But to me the goal is to do that. And I think it does a disservice to beer and brewers when you say they don't taste the same. And even in the rule book, I talk about judging because in the rule book, the guidelines for judging, it says something like, don't penalize this beer because of the lack of alcohol. And to me, it's like, if it doesn't taste like beer, you should penalize it. And I've had Athletics, I've had Brooklyn's, and those are pretty close. And it's, they're close enough that it's like you can fool some people sometimes and say, this tastes like beer. Or they say, you tell them there's no alcohol, and they're kind of shocked. And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be them tasting it and going, whoa, I want alcohol. We should be as close as possible so that and it should look like beer too. I've had some, I'm not going to disparage anybody by name, but I have had some products that are very watery, and they're thin and watery, and they shouldn't be. And then you go on Facebook or something, you see reviews, and some people trash them out and say, oh, that's the worst beer ever. But it's, I think we should make an effort to make them as close as possible to leaded, or you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to say that real beer, because it is real beer.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it should be as close as possible. And it is difficult to make good non-alcoholic beer. The VA asked me to write an article for New Brewer a couple of years back to kind of outline the ways craft brewers can make non-alcoholic beer. And there's 4 general ways to do it. But in those ways, you have to innovate. Like all of us in this room are craft brewers, and most of us are. And all of us are innovative, and you could take those 4 ways and innovate on each one if you want, depending on how much capital you have, but you can make decent tasting non-alcoholic beer. And to me, there's really no excuse to come up with something that's thin, watery, when it should have body, it should have a head on it that lasts for as long as the style dictates, should have flavor, a nice aftertaste, should go well with food. My brewing education is from Belgium. I have a PhD in brewing, and that's one thing they always taught was if you formulate a beer, and back in those days it was all about alcoholic beer, you formulate a beer, it should be, number 1, fully balanced, number 2, drinkable, even if it's high alcohol, low alcohol, you should be able to have a few of them, and number 3, it's got to go well with food. And if that applies to the alcoholic beer world, it should apply to the NA world.
I think it's important to also notice that this is in a certain way, this is an old trade. I mean, when you look at the history of food products, including drinks, when chili peppers first got into Europe, one of the main things people would do with it is take a 3% beer, put a tiny little pinch of this in it, and sell it as an 8% beer. You get that chest-warming, quality, which now they're doing with all the non-alcoholic, cocktails or whatever else. Chilies are a main thing to bring about that trigenital warmth.
Yeah.
The reason why, Kraft American slices are yellow is because they used to add a coloring agent that made the cheese look older, and therefore it would be more flavorful. The reason why Coca-Cola is brown is supposed to look like it was in a barrel. So all of these things were originally started as adulterations, and then you move your way into building a structure of what you could call it, a sort of sensory trickery, but you're in on the trickery.
Yeah.
And I think of it like on my roof in New York, I have lots of beautiful real plants. I also have a very realistic fake turf. And when I first put it up there, I thought this is going to be just kind of cheesy and funny. The thing is, it's not cheesy and funny, it works. Like, it changes your mind, everything about your surroundings. The trees come down to the real plants, come down to this beautiful thing, and you put your feet in it, and in 5 minutes, you will not even, people lay down on it like it's grass as far as we're concerned. And you know that it's not real, but within a couple of minutes, it doesn't matter. And that's exactly, if it's done well, and that's exactly what you're doing with beer. And in this case, there are really 2 goals. You're trying to, there are 3 main goals. You're trying to reduce what we consider worty flavors. When you make alcoholic beverages, you're always trying to transform the substrate. No wine, no good wine tastes like grapes. In fact, if you said a wine was grapey, that's bad. Same is true. No bread should taste like dough. And no beer should taste like wort. You're also trying to get the fermentation characters, the fruity characters, and everything else. So all of these Strecker, aldehydic characters and everything else, from potato to all these other, hay and whatever else, that hot honey become worty flavors. The consumer doesn't know that, that it tastes like wort. They just know that it doesn't taste good. Right. And it doesn't taste like beer. You're trying to reduce those, you're trying to bring out the stuff that you would normally get in a fermentation, and you're trying to achieve body and drinkability, as Keith said. And if you can do those things very convincingly through balance and any number of these processes I'm talking about, then you can achieve this kind of mental trickery where everything falls into place and the fact that it has no alcohol disappears for you.
How many different beers does Athletic have at this point on the market?
So I think last year we launched 48 beers total. But the great thing about non-alcoholic beer is, just like a real-world taproom, you can do an e-commerce taproom essentially,
Yeah.
where we trial things at very small scale, find out what sells, what works, and then we bring a very tried and true lineup to retail. And so our retail lineup almost never changes unless there's a huge.
What are the styles that are leading the business right now?
We generally bring our most highly awarded, most popular, best-selling beers to retail. Our classic Run Wild IPA is our #1 seller. It's like a very approachable West Coast, more traditional IPA, and then as well more modern New England hazy IPA called Pre-Wave. But then recently, and Upside Down's been our very popular Golden Ale. I remember 2/3 beer the whole time. We recently launched concluded a 2-year experiment to get to an incredible crushable light beer that encompassed the efforts of all our brewing and lab teams, called Athletic Light. And so that launched in March and has immediately jumped to a pretty sizable portion of our sales right from the jump.
How long, walk me through that process just a little bit of trialing a new beer, putting it out there. When do you guys reach the point where you feel, okay, this has done what we wanted it to do and now it's ready? Are you going through a lot of test batches? Is it?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
So everything Garrett keeps said about the full beer experience and what needs to be applies true. And they're more sophisticated in that than I am, as is our team than I am. But adding on top of that, ingredient selection in non-alcoholic beer is incredibly important. We are so focused on just the starting building blocks of our beers as well.
Yeah.
To get to a beer, Athletic Light was a 2-year process to get out to market. We wanted to make a really refreshing, crushable light beer that built on the existing light beer category's flavor at all the macros we wanted to hit for an anytime, anywhere beer. And our goal was to broaden the craft beer consumer that we could reach with that. Whether any of us like it or not, light beer is still a huge category. And I know most craft beer drinkers like light beer from time to time also. And so we wanted to open the aperture of customers we were speaking to with that. So it had a real marketing reason for being in the world as well that built on our existing portfolio. And we're super thoughtful about how our retail lineup plays in the world. I would say the normal process to get something out to the world, if something were to challenge our 4 leading brands right now, we have a 3.5 barrel and a 7 barrel system, and then we trial up from that to e-commerce releases, and then the most popular e-commerce releases will make it out to the world beyond that. We have incredible brewing and lab teammates who an idea can start with anything. And an example I've given recently is our first dried coffee porter. One of our West Coast teammates got 10 local coffee roasters. As a team, we did sensory on the coffee roasters, picked the favorite coffee roaster, put that into a number of porter recipes. Then the team did sensory on the porter recipes on a small scale. And then the favorite porter recipe with the favorite roaster, we put in an e-commerce release. And then we did a few iterations with our customers taking feedback on it. And then that was hugely popular, and that made it out into the world this year as a limited release then at retail.
Yeah. Cool. Garrett, you're always tinkering with beers. You're always trying to unlock new flavors. Are you thinking about future NA recipes? Is it now part of your working brain of?
Oh yeah, all the time. And it's an exciting area because you're trying, you're trying to make something out of, very little. In a way, it's like, one of my brothers is vegan, for health reasons, and at Christmas and Thanksgiving, whatever else, he would get a whole different meal. And for me to learn to cook vegan food, as a dedicated carnivore was pretty interesting. I had to learn a lot about miso and all these other things that I wasn't really cooking with, and learn how to make food that was at least as good as what we were eating, and sometimes better. Yeah. And so this is it's a creative challenge, But in a way, it's sort of like I don't know, I used to be a filmmaker, a long time ago, and I always said, there's a certain thing about the rigidity of Pilsner, there's a certain rigidity about the Western and the James Bond movie, because there's only one plot. Right? Like, you know what's going to happen, and you know approximately how it's going to happen. The only question is, can you do it with style?
Right.
And you're in this little box, and when you're in that box, what you can do with it is all the fun. And so, when we're playing within these frameworks, you want to taste like an IPA, but you can't have this, you can't do this, you can't do that, and you don't have any alcohol. It's like, okay, well, how good are you then? And so that makes for a real challenge. And we have certainly evolved, and for me, it's exciting to watch, our versions of this get better and better and better. And there have been a couple of missteps where I was like, no, that's not, that's a good drink. It tastes nice, but it's not entirely believable as the beer that it's supposed to be. It's not that it doesn't taste good, but it's a different thing, like not tasting good and not tasting like a beer, because it didn't quite reach that spot where its lack of alcohol disappeared, or the fact that there's that it was manipulated in various ways to show up that way. And so finding your way through that on a consistent basis when something is so fine-tuned is an interesting difficulty.
There's obviously other non-alcoholic beverages out in the space. There's been spirits and there's been wine that have shown up. Keith, we were talking before this panel started, and you think beer has a unique opportunity to sort of run this category? Why should people be drinking NA beers over NA wines or NA spirits?
Well, beers is the beverage of moderation, and all of us know that. You can go have a couple cocktails and you're going to be pretty buzzed. You can have a couple glasses of wine and that's it. But if you're thirsty and you want to drink and you're quenched, you got to go for beer. And if you want hydration, you go for non-alcoholic beer. And with flavors, there's a lot of flavors. And at Seria, we have two right now, but the reason we're not going to really experiment with a ton of, well, we do experiment with styles and flavors, but the thing I learned over the last 40 years of brewing is that when I launched Blue Moon, we had 6 flavors. There was nut brown ale, raspberry cream, honey blonde, abbey ale, Belgian white, pumpkin ale, and what we found is that it was a logistical nightmare for not just for us, but for the retailer, the salespeople. It was very difficult, and so in 1998 or 99, I cut it down to just one. I said, okay, Belgian white is ahead. Let's just stick with one flavor. And what happened is people pushed back, and they said, no, everybody wants all these things. And I said, we're going to stick with one. And when we did that, everybody focused on our one flavor. Blue Moon grew to become the biggest craft beer brand in the United States, and really in the world. It grew to become a 2 million barrel a year brand, and for a craft brand, I don't care how you define it, craft, pseudo-craft, that's a lot of beer. And I think any craft brewer in this room would love to sell 2 million barrels of beer. And so that's what we did. And
I think something all of us on this panel feel really strongly about is food safety. So everyone talks about the front end of making non-alcoholic beer taste like real beer, and it is true beer if done well. Most of the work is on the back end. It's how does that go from a fermenter all the way through the bright tanks, the filtration, the packaging, and then last a year out in the world and be safe for sensitive populations and stand up to what you put on the label. And that's a big lift and a really important investment for people. There are great food safety consultants out there. You do need a separate food safety plan in your facility for non-alcoholic beer. It can't just be a SKU you launch and you treat it like a beer. That is dangerous. And really there's almost, unless you're putting preservatives in the can themselves, you need to ton pasteurizer. And there's almost no ifs, ands, or buts around that statement to do it safely.
Yeah.
And that's why every large contract facility that does non-alcoholic beverages in any non-alcoholic beverage category, including CSDs or anything, will have a big tunnel pasteurizer. And yeah, unfortunately it does make it a big investment to launch a single SKU of non-alcoholic beer, but the risk to the category of people skipping that whole important back half is much bigger than those investments, essentially.
Yeah, Keith.
Yeah, and Bill makes a great point. And I raised that issue a few years ago because with the advent of NA beers, anybody who's in this room who's making craft NA, you have to realize that, number one, if 5% or more of your production, and it's in the article I wrote in New Brewer, but if 5% or more of your production ends up being NA, you have to change your record keeping and everything, because the government will come asking and looking, because it's a food product, so your quality standards go up. So read the article that I wrote. The other thing that I raised was that when you remove the alcohol, I think all of us, when we were home brewers or whatever, we learned that back in the days of the Sumerians, Egyptians, the Middle Ages in Europe, beer was made primarily because it made water safe to drink. So, water in the Middle Ages, you almost couldn't drink it. You would get sick. You would almost die because it was just so polluted. Beer would clean it up because the presence of alcohol will inhibit the growth of pathogenic microorganisms. So I'm talking E. coli, listeria, botulism, all these things that can make you sick or kill you. And when you remove the alcohol, that stuff can potentially grow. And so when you see a can bulging or exploding like Bill talked about, you don't know what's growing in there. It could be brewer's yeast re-fermenting, making that product more alcoholic than NA, or it could be something else that could make you sick or could kill you. And so I raised that issue and said, okay, Bob Pease and Chuck and BA, we've got to do something, because right now, if you go in the marketplace, some craft brewers are just saying, they put on their label, please keep cold, keep refrigerated. And that's like, to me, that's code for saying, this has not been pasteurized, be careful. And that's dangerous, because again, the last thing we need in this category is for somebody, a craft brewer, to make a product that accidentally got infected with a pathogen and make somebody sick or kill them. And I emphasize kill them, because lawyers are you can't believe how hungry, you probably do believe how hungry lawyers are. They sniff this stuff out, and if you put something out that kills somebody, they will go up and down the food chain to try to get money out of your brewery, the retailer who sold your product, the distributor who distributed your product. I mean, it sets up the whole category up for some really hard times. And so you've got to be careful with what you put out in the marketplace, because again, we don't want to hurt anybody. These are our customers. We want repeat customers. We don't want to kill them.
Well, NA is basically, in a way that we're not allowed to make health claims. NA is a health claim, right? I mean, for a lot of people, that's why they're here. And if it's not true, you've basically fundamentally lied to them about what your product is. Now we sell, like I said, we sell actually slightly more than 50% of our beer overseas. We can't get away with that in the first place because they test every single batch. You send a batch to Sweden and it's supposed to be under 0.5, and at 0.51, you are finished. Like finished. They don't want to hear nothing. They're just like, you take this back and like maybe we'll see you in a year, but like you're out. You cannot mess around.
And you can. They also test. They can test for whether or not a product has been pasteurized. So there are tests for almost everything out there, and so you can't fool the regulatory agencies, because they will figure out if you're doing things correctly or not. And I go back to the story of Odwalla juice, which I don't know if anybody heard of Odwalla, but in the 90s, I remember they were producing juices in packages, and they wouldn't pasteurize because they said, oh, it ruins the flavor of the juice and it ruins the natural vitamins that are in the juice. And that was their sales spiel. And it's like,
But not to the kids.
exactly. And so what happened was they were selling their juice, and every once in a while they'd have an outbreak of listeria or E. coli, and they'd pull it back and say, oh, we're okay. But eventually a batch got out, and it happened to make, it was like 60-something people sick. It was infected with E. coli. It made about 60-something people sick, and it killed a young girl. So it's like, and then they pasteurized after that. But it's like, by then it's too late. And so that's why I'm saying that we have to get ahead of this problem, because in this room, there's probably a few craft brewers who are making non-alcoholic product that could potentially make somebody sick. And like Bill said, you've got to pasteurize. Tunnel is really the only way. You can't, some people say, well, I flash pasteurize. You can't flash and then put it in a package, because as brewers, all of us know that the majority of contamination occurs at that filler. You can put sterile beer into a tank, that's fine. Your tank might be really clean, but by the time you get to the filler, that's where most of the infection happens. So flash will not cure it. And you can put preservatives in, that could work, but again, people look at labels, you've got to label that. Velcorin is another thing that some people may use. That's tricky, because that will work in low pH products like a sour, but if you're making beer's at that pH where Velcorin is tricky. It may or may not work. And by the way, one of the breakdown products is methanol. Small amounts, but it's methanol. And I know in California, a lot of food safety people try to search out those products made with Velcorin or preserved with Velcorin, and they say do not drink those because of the methanol. It is minuscule and it's allowed by the government, but nonetheless, nobody wants to drink methanol.
A lot of people don't realize your average Tropicana, whatever else, orange juice on the shelf is 0.3, 0.4% alcohol. Almost all fruit juices have alcohol in them because they start fermenting basically as soon as they're being processed, and unless they went through a process to remove the alcohol, then from the time you were a little kid, you were drinking 0.3 alcohol orange juice. It's just that's a part of the biology of life. When you get to 0.0, you're at a different extraordinary level than is provided, within nature, because you're not going to within nature achieve that. And I laughed earlier. I didn't know about that particular Odwalla. I was talking about, the situations where the fruit juices were getting out there and they had a few percent alcohol, and there were lawsuits which were successful, saying that you sold 3%. And this is going to happen within the kombucha space, because it's the Wild West out there, and everybody's lying. Everybody's lying. It's like about the probiotics. We got this, we got that. This is it's like almost all of it. It's like fish. When they say the fish that's on your plate, one, didn't come from where they said it came from, and two, it is not that fish. Right. It's like there's 25%. It's like that's not red snapper, and it's not from wherever. Nothing here is true. And that's true in the kombucha space. It's true in a lot of these kind of health claim wellness spaces. Yeah. And eventually people are going to get clipped. And I'm not interested, and we're not interested in getting clipped along with, folks who aren't, playing by the rules. The great thing about for us starting in Europe was that we had to come correct, from day one anyway, because they call you on, they're doing all their taxes and everything else are based on, your percentage of alcohol. You have a completely different tax base, which is true in the United States as well, everything. And they are, if you want to see serious, they are so serious. Like I said, 1.1 over the line, or a fraction thereof, that they don't want to hear it. They're like, no, you lied to us and now you're in trouble.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I did just want to really quickly underline this, probably the single most important takeaway in this is that non-alcoholic beer is not possible without tunnel pasteurization to be safe. It's almost not possible, and in every breath we take, there are thousands of yeasts and bacteria in everything, and even if it's for a split second at the canning line, those cans are bouncing down without a lid, or even if it's a second, thousands of yeast and bacteria are now in that can as it goes out into the world. So,
which is inevitably a sugar liquid, unprotected, by alcohol, you're done.
And all you need is one cell, and there's thousands, but all you need is one to start growing. Question back there?
Yeah.
Lord Mallet.
Oh, hello, sir.
I just wanted to mention that you talk about tunnel pasteurization, and those are often very large machines, but there are also very small scale, like 2 cases of beer sized machines to do that tunnel pasteurization. So it is something you can do at small scale or large scale. There's equipment across.
Yeah, what he's talking about are batch pasteurization.
Batch pasteurization.
Yeah, so there's tunnel, which is the long, obviously we all know what tunnels are, but there's batch pasteurizers too, which mimic what you do in a tunnel. You can get, 80, 100, 60, 70 PUs, pasteurization units, in a batch pasteurizer, tunnel pasteurizer, but like Bill said, it's an absolute necessity to pasteurize NA beer to protect your customers. You got to do it, no questions about it. And if you don't do it, I would just say shame on you. Because here, we've tested your product, they're pasteurized. This is, on this panel, all our products are pasteurized. And it's not something we brag about, but it's something we have to do. It's a moral obligation. You got to pasteurize.
No, we never try to find a way around that. That's not, it was never going to be doable.
Yeah. There's also a moral component with hitting the numbers that you're saying as well. If you're putting out a 3% when you're saying that it's 0.5, you're not meeting the moral obligations that your consumer, that your drinker is expecting as well. That's the, we got into pasteurization pretty quickly. I just want to go back to making sure that there is truth in ABVs.
Yeah, I mean, if someone is, has, whether it's a medical problem, or an alcohol problem, a spiritual problem, or whatever else, and you are saying that you are 0.4, and in fact you're 2.5%, like, you're a horrible person. I mean, like, never mind, like, what's illegal. I mean, that's really horrible,
I'm trying to see if anybody's shrinking into their seats right now.
No, but that was like, that thing with McDonald's was found, in India were making their fries and they were spraying them with beef extract. And people lost, not surprisingly, lost their minds.
Yeah.
Now, do I believe that's wrong? No, I don't have that religion, but I mean, that's really wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, wow.
Let's take a couple of questions from the audience. Let's start right here.
It seems like legislative advantages are fueling a lot of growth right now, especially direct to consumer. How much have you guys seen, obviously volume is one thing, but marketing and being able to get in front of customers because of shipping advantages, how much has that played a role in the growth of the segment in the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think, so it's not a blanket national difference. It still unfortunately is the state-by-state regulatory world, and there's at least 7 states with exceptions. Or a different license in other states or stuff like that. But the marketing flexibility is great. I drive our company logoed van to the beach on weekends, and I pull open the side door with a cooler, give out 200 beers in a half hour, and I'm gone. And those are 200 people who've never experienced non-alcoholic beer, who just got it in their hand, and they're going to try it down on a warm beach. Be like, oh, this is pretty cool. And so definitely advantages. That would otherwise require a permit. And it makes digital advertising much more possible too. But I will say, just like in any beer category, marketing is very important and being intentional about how you market. I think just broader craft beer in general, if you walk down the beer and beyond beer set these days, every category in beer in there, pretty much outside of craft, is doing a lot of marketing. I think craft beer is mostly competing on the shelf, rather than out in the world to drive people to that shelf. And so you have to be really intentional about marketing and how you're going to bring people to your brand, no matter where you're selling it. So there have been a lot of brands that have launched along the 3 of ours who aren't growing the same way or aren't on the retail shelf too. So in your ROI calculus, it should be how I'm going to make it, what the investment in equipment is, what teammates are going to work on this. On our team at Athletic, we have at least 10 amazing lab professionals, and now we have about 6 regulatory compliance professionals. And so that's a huge investment with a real food safety plan. And then obviously food safety equipment as well. But beyond those investments, how are you going to market your non-alcoholic beer to get over the education hurdles, bring people to the shelf and everything? So There were a lot of seltzers launched in the past 3 years, and it's no surprise that Truly and White Claw are still keeping their market share because they are spending on marketing and driving new people to their shelf every day. So, marketing in whatever form, there's like money marketing, and then there's time marketing, like I just referenced. But like it's a time resource calculation on my part to show up at the beach with a van and meet 200 people for sure. So.
And I think it's the first brand that we built from the ground up, that, because we had to, with our tagline, which was do more, and that spoke to, not talking about disappointment, but that this was a casual decision, or could be a casual decision that you just wanted to do more, whatever it was. Like you wanted to get up in the morning and go for a run. You wanted to, drive to wherever you were going, whatever do more was going to mean for you. You weren't going to be all groggy in the afternoon after having had a glass of wine or a beer. You're going to have, a beer with your sandwich and get on with your day, whatever it was going to be. But we had never done anything like that where we basically built a brand. The name Special Effects, and I had to give that name up, and I handed it over. Special Effects was originally the name of our special barrel aging program, of all these strong beers. And we're sitting there going through, and I'm like, which I thought was the coolest name, right? And I'm going through all these things, we're trying to come up with a name for it. I'm like, all right, I got the name. And, and then I'm like, what? I got to hand over Special Effects. Because it's like, Special Effects is a great name. It's like, the special effect is that there are no effects.
Yeah.
It's like, it works, it's like a triple entendre. I'm like, oh man, I kind of handed it over, but it was too good.
Yeah.
I want to get back to direct-to-consumer.
Yeah.
One of the things you have to be aware of with direct-to-consumer, with the NA world, that a lot of people, we suffer with, is the fact that when you're going direct-to-consumer and shipping, products freeze because there's no alcohol. Yeah. and it's nobody really talks about it, and but that's one of the things you just have to deal with in the wintertime.
It happened to us 2 weeks ago. We did a full investigation, whatever else, and we found that like in that part of the country, they weren't a temperature controlled truck. They had a cold snap. It went down into the 20s overnight, and it just it froze and the can puffed up. But we had to have it analyzed to make sure that nothing untoward had happened. So the liquid was in there, was still what it was supposed to be. It just froze, and that's not something you normally have to worry about.
And even if you do, you pay as the supplier, you can pay extra for freeze protection, all these other things, but that doesn't always work. So you just have to be prepared, and you have to set aside a small budget to cover the losses. Because when you start shipping across the country, it can become a little bit expensive for the smaller players. So you got to be aware that no alcohol means this stuff could potentially freeze in those states where it gets cold, like here.
You almost need a meteorologist on staff now. So,
yeah.
There's a question right there.
I was wondering if you guys could just speak to if there's been any tests you've done with sorbating and sulfiting beer versus pasteurization, or if there would have to be something on the label as a food product that contains sulfites, if there's any research you've done with that.
Any kind of chemical,
I guess Keith could probably speak to it much more on a technical level than I can, from a guy who's more outside world focused and like customer focused. At Athletic, we never wanted anything on our can that we weren't proud of. And then also a lot of retailers require you to disclose that and won't let it on the shelf. So a lot of top retailers, and increasingly so as everyone acts more like the big natural chain retailers, it'll probably really limit your retail selling universe.
Yeah, exactly what Bill says. Any kind of chemical preservatives, you can use them. Got to label them, and even if you don't label them, the Whole Foods, natural grocers, any of these natural supermarkets, they want to know. They want you to sign off on what's in your beer, and if there's anything on their list, they have a list of what's allowable and what's not allowable. No, sorry, list of just what's not allowable. If any of those ingredients are on that list, and that preservative is. It's like they'll say, sorry, we don't want your product, and so yeah, it will limit where you can sell it.
Very much so for us, and in Europe as well. We never considered those things, and even that's kind of. I think every brewery has a religion, and your religion will be challenged as it will be in real life. And part of our religion was like that's not something that we want, that we want on any of our products. Even years ago, 10, 15 years ago. It was, before you had all these great purees and stuff that were, that were sterile, that were sterile packed. I remember looking for lemon juice with no preservatives, and it was almost impossible. I had to buy organic lemon juice from Sicily. That was very, very expensive in order to make this beer, because every single processor had some kind of preservative, in it, usually, an antioxidant of some sort. That no, that's not what we're doing.
We had another question. Oh, how about right there?
We're seeing Gen Z kind of lead the way in the sober, curious lifestyle and really dip out of drinking. But we're also seeing Gen Z not really enter the craft beer market. Have you put any thought into how the NA beer market can really reach Gen Z?
I guess kind of what I was saying before. Also, like, we heard that stat, all of us on stage the other day from Mark, that the craft beer audience has aged 1.5 years over, I'm not sure what time frame. I do think part of it is just the lack of overall marketing craft beer is doing. So people who know about craft beer, and they're competing on the shelf, but like, what are we all doing to speak to 20-somethings and drive them to the craft beer shelf, and where are we meeting them in the world? That, I think, should be a question across ABV we should all be asking ourselves. Like, craft beer needs to really step up marketing and drive new people to awareness, and those charts that have been going down could start to level back up as we drive more people to the shelf. But there are natural trends of mindfulness and wellness. I think those are more occasion adders. Like, if I had to say my personal opinion, I think those are more occasion adders to the weekdays and occasions when non-alcoholic beer is consumed. The world is a stressful place, and I don't think anyone is calling the end to alcohol consumption or anything. But
Well, I'll give you one just very quick example. I did a thing, more than 10 years ago, where it was Gourmet Magazine, so maybe it was 15 years ago, and I was putting on a demo, and the person before me, she had a thing where she was demonstrating through different spicing and acid additions, whatever else, how to make all sorts of foods work with all kinds of wines. And she worked for Robert Mondavi. And what she said was, we have a team at Robert Mondavi of 20 chefs, and all we do is work on recipes that make Mondavi wines taste great. On any given day in the United States, there'll be 50, 60, 70 Mondavi wine dinners across the country. And they have 20 people working on food pairing, how to salt and how to spice things so that all their stuff tastes great. If you want to understand why we are losing, to these guys, to cocktails and to the wine people, that's how hard they are working on real life. What people actually want, what matters to them. Does it taste good in the way, and does it work for me in the way that I'm actually living? We do almost nothing. I mean, compared to these people. I'm not saying we're Robert Mondavi, that we have this money, but if you even cut it down, almost no brewery in this room has one person who does that, generally. Maybe one or two of you do. But we're not taking it seriously. We're not taking people's lives seriously. And I think part of what NA beer is about is taking people's lives seriously. How do people actually live? Are you gonna have a beer at noon on Thursday? Really? Is that gonna be fine for you? Like, then how are you gonna show up, in this person's life and do something for them? And the wine people are all over it. They are so serious, and so are the cocktail people. That's why you go into every great cocktail bar in the world, and there is a non-alcoholic cocktail program, which is just as serious, as the alcoholic cocktail program. Those people do not mess around. So I think that across, I'm not talking about just NA beer, I mean across, the way we talk about marketing and whatever else. That's what my first book, Brewmaster's Table, was about. People eat dinner every day, get with it, be in the room, and matter.
As we've started to see laws change where marijuana is now becoming legal for personal use in a lot of states, is there a potential for synergy to exist between marijuana and NA beer? in a way that I know.
That's right.
Yeah, it's-
I wrote the book on it, but yeah, and I'll go back to the Gen Z question. You said why sales are going down, and I think that was a great segue to this because younger people, especially Gen Z, Gen X, you name it. Younger people now have more options if they want to avoid alcohol because there's so many. I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 28-year-old daughter, an 18-year-old son. So they're in that age group where I can get cheap marketing research done. And they and their friends they almost abstain from alcohol at times, and sometimes they just stay away from it. Sometimes they use cannabis as a replacement, and so that's one thing you have to really seriously look at if you're a big beer producer or whatever, big beer guys. That's why some of them are getting into cannabis because it provides another option for younger people to enjoy a weekend without, as my daughters would say, ruining your liver. And so, I saw statistics. More and more, you're seeing them. More than 50% of Americans think that cannabis is more healthy than alcohol. That's a scary thought to big brewers and to alcohol producers when the majority of Americans believe that cannabis is more healthy and alcohol is less healthy than cannabis. So and these are young, that's the Americans in general. As you get younger people and question them, that percentage goes up. Up to 70%, 80% of young people will say, "Oh, cannabis is healthy. It's a plant. Alcohol is terrible for my liver." So it's another option for young people, and that's primarily why we got into the NA business was because if you want to make a beverage I'm a beer guy, so I wanted to make beer with cannabis, and the first thing you find out is you cannot legally sell a product with alcohol and cannabis in it, and so we said, okay, we won't. We'll make NA beer, and we'll make our cannabis water soluble and toss it in there, and of course the BA saw this huge need for it, so I wrote a book, and actually I brought it. I could give it to John to give out as a prize here if anybody. I don't know if you have I wrote this last year. It's brewing with cannabis, and I tried to make it as easy to read as possible, so anybody can go through it and read and see kind of the history of cannabis, the legalities, the marketing, the sales. I threw in some homebrew recipes with it, and but it's another option for young people, and you're going to see just more and more beverages come out with cannabis. You're going to see occasions with cannabis that used to be alcohol occasions, or maybe they're different occasions, like Bill was talking about. There's a lot of occasion-based drinking going on out there. Sometimes there are some occasions where cannabis just goes better. I mean, in this room, how many people have smoked cannabis? There you go. See, you guys, and those of you who haven't, when it becomes legal in your state, I guarantee you'll probably say, well, maybe now that it's legal, I'll try it. And you try it, and first thing you do is you may smoke some, and then after that you'll say, you know what, I'm coughing, and with COVID, I don't want to risk my lungs. So then you go to edibles. And after edibles, you say, well, I want something more social, because at the end of the day, at a wedding or a special event, you can't toast with a gummy. You toast with a beverage. And so that's why beverages just make sense to all of us. Everybody in the Western Hemisphere here, we were raised on celebrating over beverages. I don't care, if it's the new world, the old world. Beverages are what we drink and socialize with, and so it just makes sense to have this type of product, a beer beverage with cannabis. It's another option, and so we're going to see it increase, and we've been in it for 4 years now, and we're seeing it increase. We're in Colorado, California, and it's just I was going to say it's getting worse and worse, but it's getting better and better. So.
Well, and also, weed is just I personally don't care for THC, but weed is a cool plant. I mean, like, I cruised them last year. I'm like, you should have seen me. I was like High Times Magazine. I'm taking all these beauty shots. I'm not even going to smoke it. Like, my friends love me now. I'm not like, you know, I'm a good farmer. But, you know, I haven't tried it yet, but all of them tell me like that it's awesome.
Yeah.
No, and just to piggyback on that, it really is a cool plant, because a lot of us are familiar with THC. It gets you high, and we've read about CBD that makes you tired and helps you sleep or whatever, maybe take away pain. But there are more than 100 cannabinoids in the plant, and most of them haven't been identified. It's absolutely crazy. I even write about it in here, some of them that have been identified. There's some that act like caffeine, some that will definitely make you tired, some that will definitely make you sleepy and take away pain, anti-inflammatories, some like Viagra. I mean, it's crazy in this plant, and it was made illegal, and I talk about why it was made illegal, but primarily racial reasons and threats to profits to big corporations. It was never ever studied as to whether the plant is highly addictive or there's no medical value to it, that's why it's illegal. The federal government currently says there is no medical value to the plant and it's highly addictive, and it's like far from it. It was made illegal because of prejudicial reasons and because of early immigrants. Hispanic people, Chinese immigrants who were brought over to work the railroads, African Americans a lot of them were using cannabis, jazz singers. I mean, it's crazy. The plant is helpful to humans, and it's absolutely illegal. So that's why I can't wait till it's made legal.
I wish we had more time, but we're at the end of our hour.
Do you want to give this away as a prize?
Sure. I don't know how we would do that, but who wants the book?
Fire it into the crowd of the cannon. Something in the back that's blocked, you know.
Yeah.
Quick shout out, John Holl has a book launching Tuesday.
Oh yeah, the Kraft
Probably
American cookbook
wouldn't say
comes
that.
out on Tuesday. Thank you.
I know he probably wouldn't say it himself. So.
No, and I was waiting after Keith pulled his book out. I was hoping that you had a copy of the Oxford Companion in your back pocket. That
I do not. It's one of my, I have a few rules. I do not carry the product, on me. It's like when I go out with salespeople, we will have dinner. It will not be standing up, and it will not be at the venue. Those are my rules.
Those are the rules.
And that's how I avoid having two chicken wings and a bag of fries and 8 beers for dinner, like y'all did last night.
Nobody lives better than you. Garrett, Keith, Bill, thanks so much for being on this panel. Thank you to ProBrewer.